All right, guys, welcome to lesson 7.5. Here we are going to review the sum and difference formulas for sine, cosine, and tangent. So I'm assuming you guys are going to have to memorize these. So hopefully we can figure out a way to do it. So sine A plus B is actually equal to sine A cosine B plus cosine A sine B. And someone once taught me it's like a cheer. So sine of A plus B is always sine, cosine, cosine, sine. So for both of these, it's going to be sine, cosine, cosine, sine. And then we'll talk about the signs. So when it's a minus, it's still sine, cosine, cosine, sine, but the sign now becomes minus. Okay, so for all the signs, it's sine, cosine, cosine, sine. If it's plus, it's plus. If it's minus, it's minus. Now for the cosines, it's cosine, cosine, sine, sine. So cosine, cosine, sine, sine. Cosine, cosine, sine, sine. And it's always AB, AB. Now for cosine, actually the sign is opposite. If it's plus, it's minus, and if it's minus, it's plus. All right, so that's those. And then for tangent, unfortunately, I don't really have an easy way to remember these, but if it's tan plus, it's tan A plus tan B, all over, but then the denominator is opposite. 1 minus tan A times tan B. So on top it's the same, on bottom it's opposite. And then same thing for the minus though, the top is going to be the same, tan A minus tan B, and the denominator is going to be plus. 1 plus tan A tan B. All right, and again, I would go into this lesson assuming you have to have those memorized. Okay, so using our identities, can you establish this identity? So verify this identity. So here we have a cosine difference, right? So we're going to use the cosine difference formula, which is cosine A cosine B plus sine A sine B. And then obviously in this problem, the pi over 2 is like the A and the theta is like the B. All right, so we're just going to plug those into our formula. So again, we said it's cosine A cosine B plus sine A times sine B. And then we just have to evaluate this. Well, cosine of pi over 2, you guys know on the unit circle is 0, so that makes this whole thing 0. So we'll just cross it off. And then sine of pi over 2 we know is 1, so 1 times sine is just sine. And that's what we wanted, so we are done. All right, cool. Moving on. So let's do another evaluating using these identities. So example 2, find the exact value by using sum or difference formulas. So is there any way to get 7 pi over 12 by either adding or subtracting 2 radian angles? And hopefully you guys say, well, actually, I can get 7 pi over 12 by adding pi over 3 plus pi over 4. Because if you think about a common denominator, that would actually add to 7 pi over 12. And then, if we call this one A and this one B, we could just use our cosine A plus B formula. Okay, so back up to the top. Cosine A plus B is cosine A cosine B minus sine A sine B. Cosine, cosine, sine, sine. Opposite. And then just use your unit circle. Cosine at pi over 3 is is, what's that, 1/2. Cosine at pi over 4 is root 2 over 2. Sine of pi over 3 is 1/2. Nope, just kidding. That's root 3 over 2. And sine of pi over 4 is root 2 over 2. And then if you guys just simplify this, if you multiply these, and we're actually not going to do this one, so we'll just keep going. This is going to be root 2 over 4 minus, and this, if you multiply, is going to be root 6 over 4. And if you want to write it as just one big fraction over 4, it's just root 2 minus root 6 all over 4. That's it. All right, I want to do number 3 because this one's a little bit different. So this one, let's see, we're using inverse sine of 3/5 is actually, let's call that angle A. And then inverse cosine of 5/13 is going to give us an angle, let's call it B. And we want sine of A plus B. So this is really just a sine of A plus B formula. All right, so let's go ahead and write out our sine A plus B is sine A cosine B plus cosine A sine B. All right, now we just have to find all these values. So let's see, sine of A we know is going to be 3/5. Okay, cosine B is going to be 5/13. Those were given. Plus. Now, what's cosine of A? Well, if you do a little triangle drawing, and if sine is 3/5, then Pythagorean triple will give us cosine to be 4/5. And then sine of B, we could do the same thing. If cosine is 5/13, then Pythagorean triple will give us sine to be 12/13. And then if you guys get common denominators and add this all together, this would be 15 over 65 plus 48 over 65, which ends up being 63 over 65. And that's it. All right, awesome. Flip it over. Example 4. So we're not going to probably do all of these. Let's just do, we'll see. Okay, so this one, they tell you they want cosine of A plus B, and we know that identity from the front page. Let's just write it out. So cosine is cosine, cosine, sine, sine. All right, so it's going to be cosine A, cosine B, but opposite sine A, sine B. And now we just need to find all those things. All right, so we know cosine A and we know sine B, but kind of like the other one, we have to draw the triangle and use Pythagorean theorem to find the missing side. So I'm going to draw angle A in quadrant 4. Okay, so this is angle A, and if cosine is A over H 1/2, then Pythagorean theorem gives me negative root 3 for that side. Okay, so this is angle A, and then for angle B, it's in quadrant 2. So I'm going to draw a triangle in quadrant 2, and if sine is O over H, then Pythagorean theorem gives me a negative 24 for that missing side. And this is all for angle B. And now, look how easy. You just plug all the ratios in and solve it. All right, so cosine A would be A over H, so 1/2. Cosine B would be A over H, which is negative 24/25, minus. Sine A, O over H, is negative root 3 over 2. And then sine B, O over H is 7 over 25. And now we just have to evaluate that. So if you multiply these, we get negative 24 over 50. A minus, I'm going to make a plus, and this would be 7 root 3 all over 50. And then why not just put it as one big fraction over 50? It'll be negative 24 plus 7 root 3 all over 50. All right, awesome. Now this one is the same thing with tan, so I think we can probably skip that one. Feel free to try it, and you can check with me in class if you want. But this one looks pretty different, so let's definitely do this one. And I think there's some of these in the homework too. So first of all, they want us to find g of a plus b, and notice they say that g is cosine. All right, so we know we want cosine a plus b. So cosine a plus b, we actually have it up front, is cosine a cosine b minus sine a sine b. And now we just have to, again, find those things. So if you were to make a little triangle here for angle A, it says it's x comma 1. All right, so the x value is x and the y value is 1. But let's plug in 1 to y, and let's actually see what x is. All right, because we're going to need that in order to find the ratios. So if it's x comma 1 and I plugged in 1 for y, what would x be? So x squared would equal 3, so x would be the square root of 3. All right, so I'm going to fill that in here. This is root 3. And then the radius of the circle is just the square root of 4, which would be 2. So this is just a 1 root 3, 2 triangle. Now let's do the same thing for this guy. If we draw our triangle connected to the x-axis here, now this time we know that x is 1/3, but we don't know y. So let's plug 1/3 in for x, and that'll be 1/9 plus y squared equals 1. And then if you subtract the 1/9 over, we get y squared equals 8/9. And then if you square root it, y is going to be, the square root of 8 is 2 root 2, and the square root of 9 is 3. But since it's going down, it's negative. So negative 2 root 2 over 3. And then the radius is just the square root of 1, which we know is 1. Okay, well now that we have our triangles filled out, this is actually really easy. We're just going to plug everything in. So cosine of alpha is root 3 over 2. Cosine of beta, a over h, is 1/3 minus. Sine of alpha is o over h, which is 1/2. And sine of beta is o over h, which is negative 2 root 2 over 3. And now we can just multiply everything. So if you multiply these, you get root 3 over 6. A minus, let's just make a big plus. And then if you multiply these, you get 2 root 2 over 6. And then let's just add them together. It'll be root 3 plus 2 root 2 all over 6. And that's your final answer. All right, nice job, guys. Tomorrow in class when we review, we'll do a tan together. Thanks for watching.